Good morning. It's approximately 7:05 a.m., March 27th, 2020, and the purpose of this video right now is to talk about the Defense Production Act, but not in a kind of dry, abstract policy sense, but in terms of the coronavirus epidemic that we're going through right now, or I should say pandemic, and in terms of the shortages that we are experiencing in terms of personal protection equipment that the doctors and nurses and staff at hospitals and doctors' offices, etc., need to be able to do their jobs effectively. And more broadly speaking, in terms of the various items that the country finds itself evidently in short supply of, like hand sanitizer and isopropyl alcohol, etc. You could even get it down to the level of toilet paper, which people have stocked up on, and there's now you don't see it in the stores, right? So, what am I talking about? The Defense Procurement Act. I just forgot the name of the act. Okay, the Defense Production Act. Okay, that is designed to enable the federal government, i.e., the president, to issue an order, right, an executive command that at least temporarily can compel private industry to produce certain items. That means shutting down other production lines and the ability to get engineers and experts at at making things, in terms of the assembly lines and all that kind of good stuff, and putting them together. So what I'm going to propose is a kind of super Defense Production Act that would take it a little teeny bit further, maybe a quantum leap further, actually. And I'm sure that many of the folks out there remember something called the Manhattan Project, right? Prior to World War II, theoretical physics said that it would be possible somehow to, E equals mc squared. There's all this energy in matter, right? Specifically in radioactive matter that's emitting all this energy. That if there was a way to get that to explode somehow, it would be a major bomb, right? This was theoretical. But President Roosevelt got together through the military to put together hundreds of the best people that could be found in the fields. And he said, I want you to go from the drawing boards to production. And within a couple of years or so, at a place called Los Alamos, they developed totally new ways of doing things that required, excuse me, an enormous amount of creativity, expertise, intelligence, etc. And they did this by cooperating with each other. They weren't doing it for money. They weren't doing it to have a patent on something that they could then become filthy rich off of, because people would be paying through the nose for this new capacity in the years to come. So what I'm suggesting is that the president, and frankly, he is the only one who has the power at this point to pull the trigger on this act, and it needs to be done. And it needs to be done in such a way that he says, and we're talking about Donald Trump right now, right? That he says to the collective resources of all of American industry, these are the results I want you to attain. And I would say, off the top of my head, there's no script here or preparation or rehearsal even, as you can well see. But off the top of my head, what he should be saying to them is, I want you to do whatever has to be done to manufacture 200,000 respirators, okay, within 90 days, even 60 days, whatever it takes, do it. put together all of the best. I mean, what excuse me, what is a respirator anyway, right? It's a pump that can blow out air and can inhale air, and it does so with sensors to determine the correct pressure of that air, and with sensors to determine when something happens that it turns itself on or off. And there are digital readouts that are necessary for people to be able to set the machine and to see what's happening at a specific time. Now, it occurs to me as I speak that I happen to own a device not too far away from that in a certain primitive sense. About 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, I bought a pump for my tires and my air, to pump up my air in my car tires. And what this thing does, it's quite amazing. It only cost me about less than $35. It actually inflates the tire. There's a readout on it. It tells you how many pounds per square inch are in the tire. And once you turn it on, it pumps the tire up to a certain pressure, and then it turns itself off when that pressure is attained. Now, what is this? It's a pump, it's a sensor, it's a digital readout. It even has a nice little light so that when you're using it, it illuminates the tire. Okay, so obviously that is orders of magnitude simpler than the kind of ventilator that we're talking about, that I don't really know how much it costs to retail normally in normal times. Let's say normally this thing costs, off the top of my head again, let's say it costs $80,000 normally, okay? And right now I suspect that if anybody who has one probably could get a lot more money than what it would cost normally because of the nature of supply and demand. And we'll get more into supply and demand, the cost pricing later. So what I'm saying is that by the president combining the Defense Production Act along with something akin to the Manhattan Project, you get all these experts and production experts together, and you put together, a template to make the best from scratch. Design the damn thing and manufacture it and get it done within 60 to 90 days and make 100,000 of these units or 200,000, whatever the need is, just make them. Okay, and that's the order. And it can be done at a profit. There's no need to compel people to give up their time or their expertise or their production facilities for free. I'm not talking about nationalization of the of free enterprise. Quite the contrary. The people who do this should be compensated at the highest level of what their field would entail. And I would say give them time and a half for overtime, because it probably would take a lot of hours for the months it would take to get this thing done. But once it is done, what you wind up with is an assembly line, a production facility that can churn these things out, much in the same way that during World War II, within a period of a few months, our manufacturing capacity in this country went from making cars on assembly lines, probably, tens of thousands of cars a day, to making tanks and airplanes and parachutes or, whatever the military needed. They got it done because we were at war, right? And the Axis powers presented an existential threat to our existence. Now, obviously, the metaphor holds up here, doesn't it? We are at war with this virus. It presents an existential threat to our existence on many levels, not just physically, but economically and in terms of our morale as a country, and even politically because of the disruptions. So that fighting this virus requires pulling out all of the stops. And as I recall, that's a term that may have had its origins, I will imagine, when people play an organ in a church or someplace where there's those big air-pumped organs, and these organs are more, they make more sound when they have more air. So when you pull out all the stops, all of the air pressure is released and the organ can be louder. So we need to release all of the power and pressure that is available to the federal government. That's why we have a federal government. That's why we have a president of the United States, so that he should pull out all of the stops and release all of the power and flow of resources and flow of genius and flow of enterprise, etc., material, and get this thing done. We can do it. And I'm not just talking about ventilators here, obviously. There's no reason, in my humble opinion, no, it's not humble, in my confident opinion, I have no doubt whatsoever that what I'm proposing here is possible. This is not pie in the sky. This does not require creating new science as it did in terms of the Manhattan Project. They didn't even know if it was possible to build an atomic bomb in a short period of time. But they did it. And what we're talking about here is manufacturing things that are essentially quite simple in terms of the physics. It's not a complicated new methodology that's required. Maybe we have to find more efficient ways of making them quicker. Okay, that can be done. That's logistics. That's very basic science and very basic manufacturing processes. This can be done. And if it is done in the way that I'm suggesting, America can become the source for respirators for the whole planet. Why not? If we have to make 5 million of the damn things in the next 6 months to supply the needs of everybody on Earth, not just in America, because this virus knows no boundaries, right? So that's it on the respirators. And the same thing can be applied, as I started to say, to all of the other things that are in short supply. The gowns, the masks, hand sanitizer. Give me a break. What does it take to make hand sanitizer? There's no shortage. There's no inability to produce massive quantities of ethyl alcohol and propylene glycol and scent, etc. The market should be flooded with this stuff, so people will use it as if it will use it easily and not worry about getting more. Because if you don't use enough hand sanitizer, it doesn't work. You have to have the confidence to spurt a whole bunch of that stuff in your hands and take the time to really scrub them well. And then when it air dries, your hands are clean and relatively free from infectious pathogens, right? But if you've got your little precious few ounces of hand sanitizer, you tend to not want to use it generously because you don't know when you might not get any more, which reduces the effectiveness of it. So let's produce so much hand sanitizer and flood the market with it so that, first of all, the gougers, the people that are charging $2 an ounce or more, or whatever they can get, right? Because everyone's afraid of dying. So the gougers go out of business and just make this stuff and make it cheap. Now, I realize that for some people that flies in the face of free market capitalism. Let me get more on that later. So we get back to the production of the various things. The hand sanitizer, the gowns, even toilet paper. Let's flood the market with toilet paper. We've got plenty. I mean, right now it's emergency. So we can make more toilet paper. Find ways to do it. Find ways to do it and do it so that it eases the fear and the paranoia and the hoarding. So these are all things that, in a way, do apply to the national security of this country, because it all contributes to an atmosphere of fear, an atmosphere of desperation, an atmosphere of hopelessness, an atmosphere of, my God, we can't do anything about this. It's beyond our power. Everything is all screwed up, right? Well, it doesn't have to be that way. This is why we need leadership. We need people in charge who act as if they actually care about the whole country, about all of us as individuals, as human beings, and not just care about a particular political outcome or a particular economic outcome for particular classes of of individuals and corporations. This is about survival. This is about survival. This is about who lives and who dies. And that's an issue which is too important to be left to the whims of petty politics and the greed incentives of the free market, so-called free market. So in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to say. That's why we need the Defense Production Act to be triggered immediately. And frankly, the logic for that is not complicated. It's so simple. The case that I've just laid out is so simple and so direct, and in my, not humble, in my certain opinion, I have no doubt this is true. And you may disagree or agree, but at least in my mind, it's absolutely true that what I'm proposing is a no-brainer, and that there is no legitimate reason for not invoking and pulling the trigger on the Defense Production Act. We need to produce more things that we don't have in defense of our nation, in defense of our lives, and that has to be actualized. Defense Production Act. Act on producing what we need for our defense as a nation. If you understand what I'm saying, if you think that this message has value, if you think that what I'm saying is true, then don't just nod your head and say, whoa, that makes a lot of sense, that guy's right, and then turn it off and forget about it. No. If you believe that what I've just said is true and you understand it, then you don't need me to say it anymore, right? It's in your head. You understand it. It's not complicated. The knowledge is there. The understanding is there. So as someone for whom I have a lot of affection and whom I've listened to over the years, a gentleman named Tom Hartman on the radio, he has this wonderful line that he uses when he says things that he believes are important, that people understand. And those of you who are familiar with him know exactly what I'm about to say. He says, tag, you're it, right? And what does that mean? It means that you are now responsible. You now have the opportunity, the obligation, and perhaps even the burden of speaking truth to power, depending on your position in the government, in industry, in life. You can shake things up by taking this message and, again, if you believe it's true, if you believe what I'm saying has value, if it's important, then it's upon you to spread this message any way you can. It's not my message, it's your message, if you believe this is true. And if you have the ability to make cartoons or make a video or write an essay or compose a song or a poem, or if you work in any of these fields where you actually have a concrete say in what happens, if you're in manufacturing, if you are in politics, right? If you are in government, tell your boss this is what needs to be done, and get them to see why it needs to be done, and get them to use all their strings to be pulled to get it done. It's insane that in America in 2020 that tens, hundreds, maybe even millions of people may die, and not just die, but suffer horribly in the next 6 months or so, because we don't have enough hand sanitizer, we don't have enough air pumps, ventilators to keep people alive until their immune systems kick in and they can survive, at least have a shot at survival. We don't have the ability to make gowns and nitrile gloves so that the first responders at the level of patient care can ensure their own safety and health and ensure that they don't spread this to other people in a hospital setting. It's insane that they have to use the same respirators from the same mask from room to room. That defeats the whole purpose of these devices. It's only done out of sheer desperation in triage situations. It doesn't have to be this way. It's a combination of insane and stupid, and I hesitate to use the word, but evil. And now I want to get on to a slightly different aspect of this subject, because the deeper question that comes in is, why is it like this? What prevents this from happening? Where is the resistance coming from, right? On some levels, you could say it's stupidity and ignorance, because some people sometimes just don't get it. They're used to doing things in a certain way, and any attempt to do them in a different way to them seems unreasonable. It seems like you're breaking the rules. It offends their sense of order. It's always been that way. And there's a certain kind of stupidity in that because it reflects an inflexibility of attitude. So that's one potential kind of obstruction, right? You would call that ignorance, stupidity, stubbornness, right? Ego, because once people take a position on something and you ask them to change their position, the ego says, no, I'm right. Don't tell me to do something different from how I've always done it because I'm right. I know how to do it. And they take it as a personal affront, as an offense, if you're suggesting doing something in a different way from what they've done it before. So call that stupidity, ignorance, ego, right? That's one kind of thing. But that's not evil, right? That's sort of human fallibility in the more mechanical, conventional sense of what it is. So what's evil in this scenario? What does evil even mean? And I'm going a bit off track here, but and I'll make this short. Evil is knowing what the right thing is to do, right? Evil is consciousness of what is right, but refusing to do it because doing what is right could result in some kind of price for you to pay. So if you're now somebody who has a warehouse full of nitrile gloves, right? And if you release all of these gloves into the market at a good price, let's say double what you paid for it, you get 100% markup. That's a lot of money. And once you've done it, everybody has bought all your gloves. But you've limited your ability to profit because you don't get any more and you're just a one-time shot. But if you hold on to those gloves, because people are desperate for them, and you can then see the prices go up and sell them as the price goes up, you might be able to get 2, 3, 4 times more than you paid for it. Incredible markups. And the same thing applies to hand sanitizer, and the same thing applies to respirators, etc., 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 right? So if you are in business and the aim, the purpose, the central goal of your whole life has been profit, more profit, money, more money, never enough money. It's not enough to be a millionaire. I want to be a billionaire. And if I'm a billionaire, I want to have more money than Carlos Slim or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. I want to be number one, the top billionaire. Now that is a kind of extreme and cartoonish portrayal of evil. And I'm even going to say, again, reiterate, that even somebody trapped and stuck into that mindset is not necessarily consciously evil, right? Because that's what they're used to. That's what their whole life has been built around. The acquisition of money, it's like a junkie, right? Someone who's addicted to methamphetamine or heroin or whatever the drug of choice is, or even the activity of choice. Gambling, right? Gamblers Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, all these organizations exist. to deal with addictions, things that trigger chemicals in the brain that compel us to do things. So the case could be made that the kind of greed that I'm talking about is really just an addiction in the brain, only instead of substances and sex and gambling, etc., these folks are addicted to money, to acquiring more money. And then when you get into the field of politics, the addiction is to power, right? Having power over other people, getting them to do what you want them to do. Addiction to fame. All of these things come into play in terms of why we are not properly dealing in this country with the coronavirus, right? COVID-19, getting back to square one of what this talk is supposed to be about. It's all connected. It's all connected. This virus, on one level, it is a curse. It's a plague. It's a horrible, terrible thing that is disrupting life, literally disrupting life, killing lives. And perhaps more, even more, because it's not going to kill all of us. It's going to pass eventually in some way, shape, or form, whether it takes a year or 2 years. We will develop ways of treating it. We will develop vaccines to prevent it. Excuse me. But this is going to happen again. There are more pandemics coming down the road. And I won't get into why that's happening. Has to do with global warming and mass migration and climate change, et cetera, et cetera. But this is going to happen again. And so as much as this virus is a curse, I put it to you that it is potentially a blessing if we choose to make it so. Now, don't take me out of context. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying if we handle it the right way, we can transform this curse into a blessing, into a gift. Because if we handle this the right way, the way that I'm suggesting here, in the spirit of what I'm suggesting here, although I might be off on details here and there, I'm no scientist, I'm no political scientist, I'm no economist, I'm no psychologist, but I do believe what I'm saying is true. So I'm so sure of it that I'm sharing it with you off the top of my head in this video. And my name is Nick Lento. I'm not hard to find. If I'm totally off on this, then perhaps there'll be some repercussions for me in some way, shape, or form. Or even if I'm totally right on this, there might be repercussions in some way, shape, or form. Either way, it's not about me. It's not even about you. It's about us. It's about we as a nation, as a species. We're all human. We're all in the same boat. The boat called planet Earth. There's a very thin little level, very thin little slice of biosphere that coats the surface of that Earth with an atmosphere and some living material in it. And there are limits to how much pollution and stupidity can be contained within that biosphere and still have it survive. And we are in danger of approaching those limits. And this virus is an opportunity for us on many levels and in many ways to become wiser, to become more intelligent, to become stronger, to become a better version of ourselves as human beings. Each one of us as individuals has a role to play. We all can do something. We all can do something to deal with this, no matter how small it is. It's not insignificant. So you know who you are. If you understand what I'm saying, it's on you now. So I'm going to stop at this point. Trying to think of, I'm sure there's a lot I haven't said that I should have said, but I'm going to leave it at that. So if you're still listening, I want to thank you for having had the stick-to-itiveness and the ability to pay attention for a few minutes to get this far. And if you have gotten this far and you actually understand and agree with what I'm saying, I want to reiterate, remind, reinforce the demand that is now upon you, not from me. I am not demanding it of you. Because if you understand what I'm saying here, it's your own conscience, your own sense of who you are and what's important in your life that is demanding it, that is compelling it of you to take this message in your own language, in your own way, using your own resources, in whatever way you can, be it externally small or externally large. It actually doesn't matter, because everything counts, everything matters. So tag you're it. Over and out for now.